All right, settle down, folks. So, Family Guy Season 24, Episode 9. You know, I was thinking about this episode, and it really feels like something the show's been doing more and more lately. It's like they're constantly looking for ways to take a totally normal, even kind of mundane real-world news story, and then just run it into the ground with cartoon logic until it's not even recognizable anymore. This time around, it's all about Ron DeSantis sending migrants up to Quahog, which, let's be honest, is a whole can of worms in itself. And then the show just throws literally every possible angle at it. We got Peter being the most selfish, ignorant jerk imaginable, which, shocker. We got Brian trying to be the voice of reason and then immediately tripping over himself with a foreign accent. We've got Lois trying to navigate a dinner party where she can't even remember who she's with. It's a lot. And the craziest part? They managed to cram in swingers, accidental voice changes, and a surprisingly detailed look at what happens when you don't want to do the dishes. Seriously, how do they even do this? It's like they have a dartboard with random topics and just see what sticks. But I gotta tell you, there's one moment, one specific interaction that just made me go, what in the actual hell am I watching? And it involves Brian, a Cuban woman, and a terrible impression. Stick around, you are not going to want to miss me breaking that down. But first, you know the drill. If you're finding yourself nodding along, maybe chuckling at my suffering, consider hitting that subscribe button. It's like the invisible dog leash that keeps me tethered to this insanity. It doesn't cost you anything, and it basically tells the algorithm, yeah, this guy's right, keep feeding him garbage. So do it. You know you want to. Okay, where were we? Ah yes, Family Guy Season 24, Episode 9. This episode, on its surface, is trying to tackle the whole immigration debate. You know, Ron DeSantis sending buses of migrants to places they don't really want to be. It's a political hot potato, and Family Guy, bless its heart, decided to just grab it by the spiciest end and run with it. We see Peter as the quintessential loudmouth, complaining about immigrants taking jobs while he hasn't held down a steady gig since, well, ever. He's convinced these new arrivals are going to steal his non-existent livelihood. It's classic Peter, which is to say, infuriatingly stupid. Meanwhile, Brian, our resident intellectual dog, is trying to be the sensitive one. He meets a woman from Cuba, Carmen, and tries to empathize with her situation. But then, bam, the show throws a curveball. Brian wakes up with a foreign accent, like a full-on Cuban accent. And the writers, instead of having a nuanced discussion, decide to just milk it for every single awkward joke possible. We've taught Peter and Lois trying to deal with a dinner party where they genuinely don't remember their guests, which honestly feels more realistic than most of the episode's political commentary. Crystal and Clay, these swingers, get introduced, and it's this whole weird subplot about Quahog's secret society of people who definitely don't swing with the Griffins, which is a good thing because the Griffins are, well, they're the Griffins. And then there's Stewie, trying to help Brian navigate his newfound accent, and it's this whole ridiculous doctor scene that's more about making fun of medical shows than actually explaining anything. So, on the surface, it's about immigration, awkward social situations, and accidental identity crises. But underneath, it's the show's usual brand of chaos masquerading as commentary. It's Family Guy saying, look, we can talk about anything, but don't expect us to actually have a coherent point. The writing feels, well, it feels like Family Guy. It jumps from political satire, which is usually pretty shallow, to character-based absurdity, like Brian's accent, and then to pure gross-out humor, which is thankfully minimal here. The stories don't always mesh perfectly. You have Peter's whole immigrant rant, and then you have Brian's personal immigrant story, and they feel like two different episodes awkwardly taped together. The pacing is frantic, as usual, cramming in as many jokes and plot threads as possible. The direction is standard Family Guy fare. Nothing revolutionary, but it gets the job done. It's not a show that's trying to win awards for its cinematic artistry. It's about getting the gag out. Overall, I'd say this episode is a solid, maybe a 6.5 out of 10. It has its moments, some genuinely funny bits, but it feels a bit unfocused. It's trying to do too much, and in the process, it doesn't quite nail any of it. It's a typical episode for this later stage of the show. Good enough to watch, but not groundbreaking. It's for the die-hard fans who will watch anything, and maybe for people who want to see politicians they disagree with get made fun of, even if the satire is pretty blunt. What would have pushed it higher?
A more cohesive story, less random plot threads, and maybe, just maybe, a slightly more intelligent take on the immigration issue. though I know that's asking a lot from this show. It feels like a product of its time, this chaotic energy, this impulse to take real-world issues and just turn them into a big, loud cartoon. And that, in a nutshell, is what we got here. It's messy, it's sometimes offensive, but hey, it's Family Guy. And that's what we signed up for, right? Now, let's dig into the moments that really stuck with me, for better or worse. So there's this opening number, the classic Family Guy song, and it's all about where are those good old-fashioned values? And then the chorus chimes in, lucky there's a Family Guy. It's a bit meta, honestly, because the episode then immediately throws those good old-fashioned values out the window with Peter's reaction to the migrants. He's spewing this whole they're taking our jobs nonsense, which is funny in its sheer unadulterated ignorance, but also kind of bleak. It sets the stage perfectly. This isn't going to be an episode about heartwarming lessons. It's going to be about the Griffins being the Griffins. The actual moment that got me thinking, though, was when Peter says, "You faked COVID 5 times this month," and then Lois just sighs and asks if yesterday was a hard alcohol day. That's such a subtle jab at how people deal with stress and how Lois, in particular, seems to have a whole system for coping with Peter's nonsense. It's not just a joke, it's a glimpse into their dysfunctional dynamic. It tells you everything you need to know about how they survive. Peter does something ridiculous, Lois drinks, and then she conveniently forgets so she can deal with whatever Peter's done next. It's a survival strategy, I guess. And later, when Peter's trying to get out of doing dishes, he asks, "Can't we get an immigrant for that already?" It's so on the nose with his earlier rant. He's not just saying it, he's embodying the absolute worst stereotype of the lazy, entitled American who sees immigrants solely as cheap labor. It's horrifyingly funny because it's so extreme. The writing here is sharp in its portrayal of Peter's mindlessness. He literally has no self-awareness. He's complaining about immigrants taking jobs, and then his immediate thought is to get an immigrant to do his chores. That level of cognitive dissonance is almost impressive. What I would have done differently? Maybe lean into that a little more.
Have him actually try to find an immigrant to do the dishes, leading to a whole other disaster. But the show goes in a different direction, which is fine, but that moment of pure hypocrisy is gold. It's also a moment that just screams Family Guy. They take a real-world issue, something people actually debate, and they boil it down to the most absurd, character-driven manifestation. It's not about policy, it's about Peter being a ridiculous person. My personal reaction? A grim chuckle, because I know people like Peter. Not exactly like Peter, but that underlying selfishness and lack of critical thinking, it's real. It's unsettlingly real. It makes you wonder about the people who actually agree with Peter's initial sentiment about the migrants. Are they this oblivious? Probably. Then we get to the dinner party scene. Peter, Lois, Crystal, and Clay. And the best part? Nobody knows how they met. Lois straight up asks, how do we even know these people? And the other couple is equally clueless. I just want to get this out of the way. I am completely blanking on how we met. It's a masterclass in awkward social situations. The writers are taking the universal experience of forgetting someone's name or how you know them and blowing it up to a catastrophic level. It's not just a forgotten name, it's a forgotten entire connection. The dialogue here is brilliant because it's so relatable, yet so exaggerated. It captures that feeling of pure panic when you're introduced to someone and your brain goes into DEFCON 1 trying to recall any relevant data. And then the reveal about Crystal and Clay being swingers? That's where the writers really went for it. Quagmire, Joe, and Peter are talking about the Boar's Head event, and Joe mentions getting a hospice nurse's number. Then Peter spills the beans about Crystal and Clay. They engage in interrelationship coitus on the reg. Quagmire's reaction is priceless. Big time! They tried that with me and Bonnie. And Bonnie apparently went in to talk to them for a few hours, with Quagmire stuck in the car. It's that signature Family Guy move, setting up a seemingly normal scenario and then hitting you with something completely outrageous. The pacing of this reveal is perfect. It builds from general awkwardness to a full-blown swingers revelation, and then it's followed by Joe's hesitant admission that he actually did go back for a second time. It's a testament to how the show can take a premise and just keep pushing it until it reaches maximum absurdity.
What I would change? I think they could have made Lois's struggle to remember them even funnier. Maybe she starts making up elaborate, increasingly ridiculous stories about how they met, only for the truth to be even more mundane. But the swingers plotline itself is classic Family Guy, pushing boundaries and making you uncomfortable for laughs. My personal reaction is pure, unadulterated shock, followed by a morbid curiosity. You know, the kind of curiosity that makes you think, okay, how did that even happen? It's the show's superpower, making you laugh at things you probably shouldn't be laughing at. Now, let's talk about Brian's accent. This is where the episode takes a truly bizarre turn. Brian meets Carmen, a woman from Cuba, and they hit it off. He's trying to be empathetic, drawing parallels between immigrants being separated from families and put in cages to dogs being separated from their owners. It's a decent attempt at making a point, even if it's a little heavy-handed. But then he wakes up, and he's got this full-blown Scarface-esque Cuban accent. He's talking about seeing a mouse, and it sounds like he's auditioning for a mob movie. The doctors, of course, have a ridiculous explanation: foreign accent syndrome. They say it's usually brought on by trauma to the brain, like a migraine scrambling his insides. It's such a ludicrous diagnosis, but it's perfect for Family Guy. The humor here isn't just in the accent itself, which is funny on its own, but in how Brian tries to navigate life with it. He's mortified because Carmen is going to think he's making fun of her. And Stewie, bless his little evil heart, is trying to help him, but it's mostly just him making fun of Brian. He tells Brian to repeat, "It's really nice to see you again, Carmen." And Brian comes out with, "It's nice to be here with you, baby. You're going to get humped like you wouldn't believe tonight." That's pure Family Guy gold. The contrast between the intended message and the accidental output is hilarious. What I would change? Honestly, this is one of those moments where the sheer absurdity is the point. It's so out of left field that it works. My only suggestion would be to maybe have Brian try to do a bad Cuban accent first, and then have the real accent kick in by accident later to show the contrast. But the way it plays out is pretty solid. My personal reaction? Utter disbelief. I remember watching this and just thinking, where did they even get this idea? And then the humor kicks in.
It's the unexpectedness of it all. It's the writers throwing a monkey wrench into the whole episode's plot and seeing what happens. It's also a commentary, albeit a really roundabout one, on language barriers and cultural understanding. Brian's trying to connect, and his own body is working against him. It's a metaphor for the difficulties immigrants face, filtered through a talking dog with a gangster accent. What a concept. Okay, so we've got the immigrant plot, the swingers plot, and the Brian's accent plot. What else? Oh yeah, the boar's head cold cut unveiling. Peter is obsessed with this. He throws $100 on bison. He's convinced it's going to be the next big thing. And he missed it because of the dinner with Crystal and Clay. It's a classic Peter distraction. He's supposed to do one thing, but gets sidetracked by something completely trivial and self-serving. The dialogue is short and punchy. Boar's Head is unveiling a new cold cut, and me and the guys got tickets. So far, they've only released a silhouette of the meat. I threw $100 on bison. Never know. This is just pure character work. It establishes Peter's priorities, himself, his friends, and novelty meats. It's not a deep philosophical point, it's just Peter being Peter. And the fact that he missed the unveiling because Lois scheduled a dinner, that's the entire dynamic of their marriage right there. Lois tries to keep things together, Peter torpedoes it for something stupid. What I would change? I wish they'd shown a little more of the actual Boar's Head event, or at least Peter's reaction to missing it. Maybe he tries to get the cold cut later, and it's a disaster. But the purpose of this subplot is just to be a Peter-centric diversion. It's there to make him look even more selfish. My personal reaction? A roll of the eyes and a sigh. Because, again, it's Peter. It's predictable. But the absurdity of him betting $100 on a mystery meat? That's funny. It's the kind of gamble only Peter would make, convinced he's a genius. It's the ultimate trivial pursuit for him. Then there's the whole interaction at the Havana Club. Brian goes there hoping to impress Carmen, but he's still stuck with the accent. He's trying to speak normally, but it's coming out all wrong. He even says, "It's so weird, man. In my mind, it sounds like I'm just talking regular, and outside I end up sounding like some kind of big banana head." This is where the accent plotline really hits its stride in terms of embarrassment. The writers are leaning into the idea that Brian's accent isn't just a quirk, it's actively sabotaging his life. He's trying to be smooth, trying to connect with Carmen's family, and he's failing miserably because of his voice. The moment he says, "hot chocolate for Brain," and the guy responds, "You say Brain? Do you know anyone named Brain?" It's Brian.
as in Dennehy, Cranston, and Cox. That's a great bit of dialogue. It's sharp, it's funny, and it highlights the communication breakdown. The guy's frustration is understandable, but the writers twist it into humor. It's that classic Family Guy technique of taking a potentially serious or frustrating situation and making it ridiculously funny. The visual of Brian trying to explain himself, his paws flailing, his face contorted in exasperation, all while sounding like a cartoon villain, is just peak physical comedy. What I would change? I think they could have made Carmen's family's reaction to Brian's accent a little more pronounced. They're mostly just confused or annoyed, but if they were genuinely offended or amused, it would have amplified the humor and the awkwardness. But then again, that might have made the situation too serious. My personal reaction is a mix of secondhand embarrassment and amusement. I feel for Brian, stuck in this ridiculous situation, but I can't help but laugh at the sheer chaos. It's the kind of humor that makes you wince and giggle at the same time. It's a reminder that even our most intellectual characters can be brought down by something as simple as their own voice. Let's talk about the end of the dinner party with Crystal and Clay. Peter and Lois are leaving, and they're still trying to process what just happened. Peter's still in denial about the whole swingers thing. Swingers, my ass, he says. Maybe they're just not into us. And Lois, bless her, is trying to be reasonable. If anything, it's us that's not into them. But then Peter admits, yeah, they'd be lucky to get us, but we're not that type of people. The humor here is in their complete inability to accept reality. They can't even fathom that they might not be desirable swingers. The dialogue is so self-aggrandizing, it's hilarious. They think they're too good for it, even though they clearly have no idea what they're talking about. And then the final exchange before they leave. Well, every couple except us. Except us. Why not us? It's this lingering doubt, this weird sense of FOMO, even for something they supposedly find repulsive.
It's a brilliant way to end that subplot. It leaves the audience with this thought, are they really not into it, or are they just not asked? The writers are poking fun at societal norms, at how people react to things they don't understand, and at their own insecurities. What I would change? Honestly, I think this ending is pretty good. It ties up the swinger subplot in a way that's classic Family Guy. A little bit uncomfortable, a little bit pathetic. It leaves you with that lingering question, which is a sign of good storytelling. My personal reaction? A smirk. It's the Griff's ego versus reality. They think they're hot stuff, but the reality is they're just them. And that's the real joke. They're so self-absorbed they can't even conceive of being rejected from something like that. It's a perfect encapsulation of their characters. Now, this whole foreign accent syndrome thing for Brian. It's a real thing, apparently. The doctor on 60 Minutes had an English lady who woke up sounding Chinese. And Stewie says, but everyone gets all pissed if I do it. Which is a great callback to Stewie's own various accents and personas throughout the series. It's the writers acknowledging their own history with the character. This moment highlights the show's self-awareness. They know they've played with accents and voices before, and they're making a meta joke about it. It's also funny because Stewie, the ultimate manipulator, is now trying to use this real-world condition to his advantage. He's got an excuse for Brian's accent, which is convenient for him. What I would change? I wish they'd explored the cause of Brian's syndrome a bit more, even if it wasn't a ridiculous Family Guy way. Was it the trauma of seeing the migrants? Was it something he ate? Just a little more connection to the events of the episode would have been nice. But the meta-commentary is strong here. My personal reaction? A nod of appreciation. It's those little nods to the show's past that make it enjoyable for longtime viewers. It shows they're not just phoning it in, they're aware of their own legacy. It's a clever way to tie the absurdity of Brian's situation back to the show's own established quirks. Let's talk about Peter's continued obsession with the Boar's Head event. Joe mentions, man, you really missed out on the Boar's Head event, Peter. Joe even got some chick's number, hospice nurse. And Peter's response is just a groan. It's such a minor detail, but it ties back to Peter's priorities. He missed out on a potential meat-tasting bonanza and a chance to impress his friends by not going to that boring dinner party. It's the ultimate Peter Griffin equation, personal pleasure over social obligation. The humor comes from the juxtaposition of Peter's petty obsession with the real-world events happening around him, like the immigrant situation. And Joe getting a hospice nurse's number is just peak Joe. He's always trying to find a silver lining, even if it's a little morbid. What I would change? I'd love to see a quick cutaway of Peter actually trying to get his hands on that boar's head meat later, perhaps in a ridiculous, overly elaborate scheme. That would have been classic Peter.
But as it stands, it's a brief reminder of his flawed priorities. My personal reaction? A sigh of resignation. It's just Peter being Peter. You expect it, you get it, and you just move on. It's not the funniest part of the episode, but it serves its purpose in showcasing his character. Finally, the ending. Brian is still struggling with his accent. Carmen's cousin's wedding is coming up, and she wants to bring him. But he's terrified that her whole family will think he's making fun of them. He even tries to use a fake assistant, Miss Penny Apple, to get out of it. The whole conversation with Miss Penny Apple is hilarious. She's basically lying about Brian's history with Carmen, making up a story about HR disclosures and him getting physical. It's so obviously a fabrication, but it's the only way Brian can think to get out of this. And then the kicker. She said Jenna Ortega is going to be there, and Brian's immediate reaction is, "Buenas noches." It's this desperate grasp at connection, this desire to be normal that drives him. It's a moment that perfectly encapsulates the episode's themes: identity, communication, and the absurdity of trying to navigate the real world with cartoon logic. What I would change? I'd love to see Brian actually go to the wedding and have a complete disaster unfold. But the writers chose to end it here, leaving us with the lingering question of how Brian will overcome this. My personal reaction? A laugh and a sense of relief that Brian might finally get a break, or at least have a chance to redeem himself. It's a funny ending because it's so relatable in its awkwardness. We've all been in situations where we felt like we were being judged or misunderstood. Brian's just dealing with it on a whole new level. Character heat check, people. Let's see how everyone performed in this particular hot mess. First up, Peter Griffin. He's the driving force behind the episode's political commentary, or at least the attempt at political commentary. He's the loud, ignorant voice railing against immigrants, completely oblivious to his own hypocrisy when he suggests getting an immigrant to do his chores. He's also obsessed with novelty meats and completely flakes on a dinner party for, well, he doesn't even seem to remember why he bailed on the dinner party. He's the cartoon embodiment of the worst traits of a certain political demographic, which is exactly what Family Guy excels at. He was used well here as the catalyst for the episode's opening salvo and as a constant reminder of the show's brand of shock humor. Nothing about him changes for me. He's Peter. The show clearly views him as the unchanging, chaotic center of the universe. Lois Griffin, on the other hand, is trying to maintain some semblance of order. She's dealing with Peter's nonsense, a dinner party where she can't remember who she's with, and a husband who thinks immigrants are just glorified servants. She's the reluctant adult in the room, constantly exasperated. Her best moment is probably her subtle admission of hard alcohol days as a coping mechanism. It's a small detail, but it says a lot about her life. She's used effectively as the foil to Peter's chaos. Her role here just reinforces that she's the long-suffering wife holding this bizarre family together with sheer willpower and, presumably, a lot of wine. Brian Griffin. Brian. He's the supposed voice of reason, trying to connect with Carmen and be empathetic about the immigrant experience. But then he wakes up with a Cuban accent and his life goes off the rails. His best moments are definitely his interactions with Stewie as they try to fix his voice, and his desperate attempts to communicate with Carmen and her family. He's used as the episode's main comedic engine for the bizarre accent plot. Does it change how I see him? Not really. It just proves he's as prone to random, inexplicable plot contrivances as anyone else in this show. His role here is about the unexpected consequences of trying to be a good guy in Quahog. Stewie Griffin. Stewie is the brains behind the operation, or at least the brains trying to fix Brian's brain. He's helping Brian navigate his accent crisis, mostly by mocking him and trying to find a scientific explanation. His best moment is probably his meta-commentary on his own history with accents. He's used as the problem solver, the one who can offer a ridiculous explanation or solution. He's as sharp and sarcastic as ever. His role here is to amplify the absurdity of Brian's situation and offer a knowing wink to the audience. Glenn Quagmire. Quagmire makes a brief appearance, mainly to confirm that Crystal and Clay are indeed swingers, and that Bonnie even dabbled. His contribution is mostly to add to the shock value of that subplot. He's used sparingly, but effectively, to underscore the wildness of the supporting characters in Quahog. He's still the same sleazy guy, and his brief appearance reinforces that. Cleveland Brown. Cleveland doesn't really have a significant role in this episode, which is kind of a shame. He's mentioned in passing in relation to Brian's accent sounding like Scarface, but he's not actively involved in any of the main plots. He's kind of just there to fill out the roster, a bit underutilized here. His role is minimal, almost an afterthought. Joe Swanson. Joe's role is primarily to expose the swingers subplot with Crystal and Clay. He's the one who gets a hospice nurse's number at the Boar's Head event, which is hilariously morbid. He's used to move that particular plot forward and add another layer to the strangeness of Quahog. He's still the lovable, albeit sometimes clumsy, cop. All right, let's hunt for some hidden gems in this episode, the stuff you might miss if you're just passively watching. First off, the opening song. Yeah, it's the classic Family Guy theme, but the lyrics themselves are a commentary. It seems today that all you see is violence in movies and sex on TV. But where are those good old-fashioned values on which we used to rely? This isn't just a jingle, it's setting up the episode's entire premise. The show is acknowledging that the old-fashioned values are gone, and what we have instead is a mess of political commentary, social awkwardness, and bizarre medical conditions. It's the show telling you, don't expect a moral lesson here, we're diving into the chaos. Most people just hear the tune, but the lyrics are the show's mission statement for the episode. It's a bit of foreshadowing, really. Next up, Peter's bet on bison for the boar's head cold cut. This is a throwaway joke, but it's a perfect Peter Griffin move. He's gambling $100 on a random meat silhouette. It's completely irrational, but that's his charm. It's a detail that most viewers would forget instantly, but it perfectly encapsulates his impulsive, idiotic decision-making.
It's a small character beat that solidifies his personality without needing a huge setup. It's just another piece of evidence that Peter operates on pure, unadulterated whim. Then there's the detail about the hospital doctor checking for stroke or brain cancer at 4:45. This is a quick throwaway line, but it's a jab at the medical drama genre and its tendency for dramatic diagnoses. It's also a subtle commentary on work-life balance and the idea that even serious medical conditions can be treated with a shrug and a clock-watching attitude in a TV show. It's the kind of detail that's so brief you might miss it, but it adds to the overall cynical humor of the scene. It's a little wink at the audience, who's probably seen 1,000 similar scenes on Grey's Anatomy. The interaction between Brian and the guy at the Havana Club, where he insists he heard brain, and then rattles off famous Brians like Dennehy, Cranston, and Cox. This is a clever little reference. It's not just random names, it's a quick nod to recognizable actors, adding a layer of pop culture savvy to the joke. It makes the confusion more specific and funnier for anyone who knows those actors. It's a detail that shows the writers are paying attention to what makes a joke land, even in a moment of chaos. It's the kind of reference that's lost on someone who doesn't follow pop culture, but for those who do, it's a nice touch. Finally, the mention of Jenna Ortega being at the wedding. This is a modern pop culture reference that anchors the episode in the present. It's a sign that the show is trying to stay relevant by name-dropping current celebrities. For younger viewers, this might be the hook that makes Brian's predicament more interesting. It's a way of telling the audience, hey, this is happening now with people you know. It's a small detail, but it shows the show is aware of its audience and what's currently buzzing in the cultural zeitgeist. It's a bit of name-dropping that adds a touch of contemporary flair to an otherwise ridiculous situation. Let's play the what-if game, shall we? First off, the whole Brian with the Cuban accent thing. What if instead of foreign accent syndrome, Brian's accent was somehow a conscious choice? Like he tried to learn Spanish to impress Carmen, and he just got so into it that he couldn't shake it. Imagine Brian, the supposed intellectual, deliberately adopting a stereotypical accent because he thinks it's charming, only to find out it's actually making things worse. The humor would be in his complete lack of self-awareness, thinking he's being sophisticated while actually sounding ridiculous. It would flip the script from a medical anomaly to a character flaw, which, for Family Guy, is usually more fertile ground for jokes. It would be funnier if Brian's own ego was the cause of his downfall, rather than a random brain scramble. It would also give him more agency, even if it's misguided agency. Second, let's revisit the swingers. Crystal and Clay are introduced as this couple who are clearly trying to swing with everyone. What if instead of just mentioning it in passing, Lois and Peter actually did get asked directly? And then we got a whole subplot of them trying to navigate that request. Imagine Peter, all bravado on the outside, saying, "Sure, why not?" while Lois is internally screaming. And then, as they're about to go through with it, Peter realizes he's not actually into it, or that he's terrified of Lois finding out something truly embarrassing about him during the act. It would have turned the awkwardness into a more character-driven conflict, focusing on the Griff's own insecurities and marital dynamics, rather than just them observing other people's debauchery. It would have been a more direct exploration of their marriage under pressure,
And for Family Guy, that's where the real gold often lies. And finally, the immigrant storyline. Peter's initial rant is just so loud and dumb. What if instead of him being purely antagonistic, he had a moment of genuine, albeit fleeting, confusion or empathy? What if after his initial outburst, he actually encountered one of the migrants, and they shared a brief, human moment that genuinely shook him, even for a second? Like, the migrant explains their situation, not with anger, but with quiet desperation. Peter, for a split second, might see them as a person, not just a political talking point. It wouldn't redeem Peter, not by a long shot, but it would add a layer of complexity to the commentary. It would acknowledge that these are real people with real stories, even within the show's cynical framework. It would have made the episode's political commentary a tiny bit less one-dimensional, which, for Family Guy, is a bold move. So, this episode, I'm giving it a 6.8 out of 10. Why the 8? Because there were flashes of brilliance in the sheer audacity. The political commentary, while blunt, did touch on a real-world issue. Brian's accent was bizarre and funny, even if it felt a bit random.
The swinger subplot was classic Family Guy pushing boundaries, but it lost points for being a little too unfocused. It felt like they had 3 different episode ideas and just mashed them together. The immigrant plot felt like it was going somewhere, then it kind of just didn't. Brian's accent plot was the strongest comedic engine, but even that felt like it came out of nowhere. Lois and Peter's dinner party confusion was relatable, but didn't really go anywhere substantial. Who is this episode for? It's for the true Family Guy devotees, the ones who will watch any episode, no matter how messy. It's for people who appreciate the show's willingness to tackle controversial topics, even if their approach is crude. And it's for those who enjoy random, absurd humor that comes out of nowhere. What would have pushed this score higher? A more cohesive narrative. If the immigrant story and Brian's accent story had been more inwardly linked, it could have felt less like a collection of sketches. And maybe a slightly more insightful take on the political issue, but I'm not holding my breath for that. It's a product of its time, this episode. It mirrors the current chaotic energy of the world, where real-world issues are often reduced to sound bites and exaggerated reactions. It's a reflection of that, filtered through the lens of a talking dog with a sudden gangster accent and a family that can't even remember who they invited over for dinner. And in the end, that's what Family Guy does best, taking the mess of the real world and turning it into its own special brand of animated mayhem. And frankly, I wouldn't have it any other way, even when it drives me a little bit crazy.